I would like to warmly welcome you at our press conference. We were selected, Austria was chosen to take over the chairmanship in office in the OSCE. We started this on the 1st of January in a very active fashion. We traveled to East Ukraine, one of the conflict areas within the OSCE. The OSCE, as you know, has 57 member countries. These participating states all work together to ensure security and cooperation. In 2016 and 2015, we witnessed very unfortunate developments in that this form of security is no longer an obvious thing. Anybody who was raised in Central Europe, as I was accustomed to security. Military conflict was something that's difficult to imagine for my generation, and also terrorist attacks, whenever they occurred, they were in very remote areas. So a lot has changed over the past years, and with the Ukraine conflict, there's now military conflict in our immediate neighborhood that erupted. Terrorist attacks are not relegated to some remote areas, but can happen in the core and heart of Europe. And bloc-bound manners of thinking that my generation only knew from history books has returned to our continent. We're taking over chairmanship from Germany in a very difficult set of circumstances, and I'm well aware of the fact that it will not be possible to identify quick, ready solutions. What we could do, however, is to go step by step in an attempt to achieve progress as we go along. It's important because human beings are, of course, the victims, be they in an area of conflict or as victims of terrorist attacks. We have 3 focal areas for 2017. One, trying to make a contribution to de-escalate existing conflicts. Of course, we're focusing on the conflict in Ukraine, but there are also other conflicts that will be uppermost in our minds. Second, we need to generate more confidence among participating states. I referred to this in the context of the Ukraine conflict. There has been a loss of confidence, and the appearance of this bloc-based type of approach, I think we have to counteract to make sure that we get back more confidence, as confidence is the best basis for cooperation. And the third aspect, and this is relatively recent for the OSCE, is measures to combat radicalization and terrorism. And if we really care about security in the OSCE space and a maximum of security for our populations, then we need to focus not just on military threats and conflict. We also need to look into efforts to combat radicalization and terrorism. We have about 10,000 individuals from the OSCE space that have traveled to Syria and Iraq. They there rape and kill. They sow misery, and they are a threat to our societies upon their return to their countries of origin. So our efforts to combat terrorism is not just by military means in Syria and Iraq. It is in the midst of our societies that we need to take action in terms of law enforcement against radical groups and also do preventive work, thus assuring that no more young people are enticed by these radical forces. We also have to take actions on financial matters and recruiting and proselytizing in our countries. It is our overall aim and goal to create a focal area in the OSCE in this context. Likewise, we need to be stronger in terms of using best practices, using examples established by others, but also the observer teams of the OSCE should be put to use in order to make these radical elements more visible. We will be drafting a radicalization report with recommendations for participating states. There are many other creative projects underway. How with role models and positive images we can do more in communities. So we have many, many things underway. The best way not to react solely to military threats, but also focus on efforts to combat radicalization. We're very pleased to be able to get Professor Neumann on board, special representative to work on radicalization and against terrorism. I do think that his CV speaks for itself. We've always been monitoring your activities in the closest possible manner, and we're very grateful to have you with us for the OSCE. It is every assurance of success, as well as for the chairmanship in office. You will be making positive input and ensuring step-by-step progress. In addition to this, I would wish to thank the Secretary General of the OSCE. We've established close contact last year in order to prepare for our tenure as the chairmanship in office, and expect to have excellent cooperation with the whole OSCE team. We're well aware, ladies and gentlemen, of the fact that this is by no means an easy matter. There are tremendous challenges lying ahead, and times are particularly trying. The organization is one where you have the unanimous principle that is, it's not always easy to make headway, but we will do our utmost, step by step, in order to achieve progress. Austria has a long-standing tradition, geographically positioned between East and West. We have special relations with the OSCE, headquartered here in Vienna, and we're looking forward to the task and good cooperation with all participating states. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank Austria and thank you personally, Federal Minister, for your readiness to shoulder the OSCE chairmanship this year, taking upon yourself special responsibilities for security and peace in Europe. It's all the more remarkable because Austria, in the context of the OSCE, is already doing much, not just 2 decades here, based in Vienna, and Austria is an excellent host. We're very grateful for this. In addition to that, the special commitment is not self-explanatory or an obvious thing. As Minister Steinmeier said, we're still in choppy waters, and it's all the more important to make efforts for dialogue and cooperation. Foreign Minister Steinmeier had an informal exchange of views in order to pursue security in Europe. This dialogue should now be taken further. I will now switch to English.
From my perspective, I warmly welcome the plan of Austria to continue investing in rebuilding trust and revitalizing the dialogue. And I would like to make three points. The first has to do with the divisions that we have seen emerging over the last few years in the OSCE. So rebuilding trust, the dialogue also means intensifying work on addressing the conflicts, as you pointed out, Minister. And certainly the work we are doing in Ukraine, especially through SMM, will be very central. In March, we will have to renew the mandate, to extend the mandate of SMM. In that connection, we will need also to update the vision for a function on the ground. We heard also this morning in the Permanent Council damages to a power station that is giving the energy to a water filtration station in Andivka, a water filtration station that serves 200,000 people. So we need to look at the humanitarian situation, which is extremely serious, and to take initiatives to try to protect, to ensure that the population is not too badly, too adversely affected by this very nasty conflict crisis that is ongoing. At the end of the day, the responsibility to implement Minsk is on the sides, but we will remain there to assist, to promote, to facilitate in this. And of course, the dialogue is much broader than just the conflicts. It has to touch on the broader issues. The structured dialogue on arms control, for instance, will be an important part of this process, and we look forward to working together with the chairmanship. The second cluster of issues is the impact on the region of global challenges, or more horizontal challenges that affect in different ways, but affect the whole community. And very often it is easier to align agendas in this context. Terrorism, again, the Permanent Council today started with a reminder of the terrorist acts and expression of solidarity and condolences of the countries affected, the terrorist acts at the beginning of the year. So terrorism will gain increasing profile. We're investing also in the organization in terms of building our capacities even more in addressing this issue, from violent radicalization to terrorism, the whole migration issue. The OSCE is engaged in many ways, many different ways. And the OSCE is a good actor because of our broad approach to security, where we have a human dimension, where we have an economic dimension, where we have a security dimension. So we can contribute in bringing in, I have an MOU with Interpol, for instance. So we are working to strengthen the services and to strengthen the rule of law and the police controls and the borders. But on the other hand, we also work on looking at where some of these challenges come from, the problems of marginalization in the societies that leads to radicalization. So looking into what's happening, how our societies are evolving is also a component of our approach to security. And this is also resulting in stronger partnerships. I mentioned Interpol, but UNHCR, the IOM, we have a long list of organizations with which we have developed increasingly strong, and UNODC here in Vienna, increasingly strong partnerships, and our partners for cooperation, especially in this case the Mediterranean partners. I think there is a process also there where we are stepping up our engagement. The final point is that the OSCE also provides a space for more informal engagement. I mentioned these discussions among ministers, but also the engagement that we have with civil society, with academia, with the media, the relations with the Parliamentary Assembly. So we have an opportunity to reach out. We will have this year, at least in the first half of the year, 2 big security days. One here in Vienna in March with the mayor of Vienna, Bundesmeister Heupel, Burmeister Heupel, and there will be a meeting with the mayors. So we will bring mayors from a number of cities in the OSCE to talk about sustainable cities, to talk about the problems that mayors do have to deal with, and engage countries based on the experience of the mayors in addressing issues that sometimes we struggle turning into broadly agreed policies. And the second security day in May in Prague will address the issue of the divisions in the OSCE space, so how to rebuild trust, and we will so look at the larger agenda as a follow-up of a security day we had in Berlin last year. Thank you.
Dankeschön.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kurz. I'm Peter Neumann. I teach in London with King's College. Since 2008, I lead an institute, and it deals in radicalization, ICAR, if you want to look it up. So I'm particularly grateful to have been entrusted with this duty by Minister Kurz. This is an occasion to test what we have been observing in a theoretical, analytical manner, seeing it in this forum context. So it's a decisive point. Virtually all OSCE participating states are wondering about threats in the form of violent extremism, different forms. Right extremism, left-wing extremism, or regional in nature, and in many countries, yet this so-called jihadism, which motivates terrorism and is a threat to our societies. So it's something that is uppermost in the minds of all OSCE countries. But of course, it's also true to say that there have been different approaches. Some countries actively considering the topic for many years, others only recently. So via the OSCE and with the OSCE, it's a good thing to proceed to an exchange of approaches and raise awareness about the whole issue. And this is something the OSCE truly stands for. What Minister Kurz has already emphasized, and what is really important, that this is a comprehensive approach to security. And that, of course, policing and law enforcement steps need to be taken as well as intelligence services, but that it is in essence a societal issue. We need to come to grips with the form of ideology that spawns radicalism and is the root cause of conflict that is often used by terrorists. That's why the OSCE is such an excellent organization to do this. But of course, on the other hand, there are so many countries that are members. So it's a large organization. And yet again, this is a chance to proceed to exchange of views. But dealing with conflict is possibly also a root cause of terrorism, it should be said. As a special representative, I will be working hard to address this with Minister Kurz and the Secretary General to raise awareness and to proceed to an exchange of views, not just of specific projects and approaches, but also formulating best practices, good initiatives, models for proper processes is something we need to emphasize and make available to other participating states so that all and sundry can see what is working, what is not operating well or smoothly, what we can learn from the experience of others. And in the second half year, this will take the form of a very specific report. So I'm looking forward to this function and responsibility and a chance to cooperate with all. Thank you, Professor. We will now take questions. Yes, please.
Mein Name ist Stefanie Licht.
I'm Stephanie Lichtenstein. I'm a self-employed journalist, security and human rights monitor. In your speech, Mr. Foreign Minister, you have already referred the structured dialogue that was adopted in Hamburg. It was about arms control. How are you going to go about the organization of this exchange, and what will the topics be to that end? From the very outset, we were included by Frank-Walter Steinmeier even last year. So the initiative is something that we have a positive opinion about from the very outset. But Austria, as a neutral country, furthermore, has a long-standing tradition and activities in this area of work. Now, of course, we have witnessed some critical voices in the OSCE as well, meaning that Frank-Walter Steinmeier's initiative, as introduced, is something that we're going to take further. We will be doing this in the form of in-house discussions, because I'm fully aware of the fact that our vision of the set of issues is not necessarily identical with the views of other countries that have a different historical approach and access to these topics. More questions? Yes, please.
Kerstin Knolle von Reuters. Herr Neumann.
Kerstin Knolle, Reuters. So could you explain in greater detail how this is going to be developing and who your cooperating persons will be? Well, actually, we have several workshops. In several areas of the OSCE, we will be making specific attempts to invite and get together people who have successful models and projects. We will be their platform, so to speak. Then youth should be given a voice. Last year, for example, the OSCE cooperated with Facebook. It was a very successful competition on the Internet. we were creating a platform for voices on radicalization, and this is something where we would want this web approach to be developed further, much more so than last year. And specifically, the second part of the year will see this report. And of course, we will be covering the problems, identifying them, and attributing them to several areas. But the report should be chock-a-block full of very specific examples throughout the year coming from the OSCE region, pointing to how the policies could be actually implemented and how many successful programs there are where we work with parents, for example, where something operates smoothly, but possibly even in the respective country, people don't know about this. By emphasizing and underlining these successful experiences, we could do more. If I may, I would make a supplementary comment on radicalization, where I often get the impression that it is very unpleasant. People shy away from this topic in states. A military conflict with a neighboring country will often be referred to in the greatest detail in order to describe one's own position. But radical forces within the domestic context, people who have strayed from the proper way, a threat to young people, people who could be beguiled and enticed to join, well, the temptation not to refer to this is quite considerable. And that's why we have this dearth of information. If I look to the Western Balkan, I see that the topic is a huge issue now. When I embarked on my activities as foreign minister, I first mentioned the topic. What I got back is we don't want too much of a discussion about the subject. Now, 3 years further down the road, the situation has evolved substantially. There are ever more people there at their own initiative establishing contact with us, trying to see how others deal with these issues. So focusing on the topic and doing more about it in itself will generate more activity, will elicit responses from individual countries, and we're all aware of the fact that this is a problem. Not one single state is responsible, not one single state is to blame, but rather we must all together move in the right direction with a variety of policies. But it's something that brings us all together from the USA all the way to Russia. Microphone, please. Is there any change in trend in terms of sanctions against Russia? What is the margin for maneuver in the OSCE? Not particularly substantial. A new trend with Russia? Well, sanctions are an issue in the European Union. We are a member country of the European Union, and we can take decisions there as well. But it's not the subject of today's press conference because it's not an OSCE decision to impose such sanctions. The OSCE is the organization where Russia is included, is sitting at the table, the organization where we can try to establish contact, which diminished over the last years, and impel this further. So the angle of approach, not just in and around Ukraine, but also the relationship between East and West is very different, all depending on where you find yourself. So it is of the essence to send out signals that say that not just do we want to settle the conflict in Ukraine, yes, indeed, in addition to that, we want to bring about positive work all together on the continent. We cannot mention this often enough. We, Western and Central Europe and the European Union, of course, must obviously, truthfully demonstrate that we want to bring about this positive form of cooperation, and we're sending an important signal out to Russia in that way. Undoubtedly, the situation is a complex one. I'm well aware of that. Next week, I will be traveling to Kiev and subsequently to Moscow, and I will be making every effort to bring about exchanges and conversations there. Even though we haven't had major progress, we simply cannot avoid a situation whereby we make renewed efforts and attempts. Microphone, please. Michael Manteca, Deutsches Fernsehen. Professor Neumann, you are in favor of a comprehensive European security concept to counter radicalization and terrorism. As a special representative, how can you influence this? Don't we first need harmonization in the legal context throughout Europe? Well, no doubt. You are well taken. That is right. Because for radicalization, I do not think we have one single European approach, or even that I have claimed that this is possible. What I do say is that we need to cooperate closely in Europe, certainly in Paris and Brussels, but also in Berlin. We have seen that terrorists of ISIL have made use of the absence of effective cooperation between European security agencies. That's something where we need to bring about change. I don't think we can have a European comprehensive approach in terms of radicalization just yet. But what I would defend in my functions as a special representative of the OSCE is that we have more effective communication and exchange of experience and merely learn one from another. If I look at Western Europe, I can identify many countries that have worked hard, have experience available, things that have not come forward, even in their own countries, do not appear well known. I'm not a politician. Therefore, I cannot exert influence in every way. But these new functions do give me a platform, and I will be drawing attention to this. Thank you. Additional questions?
My name is Olena. I'm a journalist from Ukrainian TV channel 112 Ukraine. I have a question to Mr. Kurz. You visited Ukraine last week, and you mentioned in your interview to German media earlier that you think that the sanctions against Russia should be lifted step by step regarding the Minsk agreements. So you saw the situation on the ground. What is your assessment right now? Do you see any possibility for lifting the sanctions in the nearest future? Thank you.
First and foremost, I would like to repeat the standards phrase that I used earlier on. Standards were a decision of the European Union, not of the OSCE. So this is something that is at the sidelines of the OSCE chairmanship in office. Of course, I will try to answer in my capacity as Minister of Foreign Affairs of Austria. All I can say is that our access in Austria, not as Chairman-in-Office of the OSCE, in our opinion, we need new momentum to come forward and be developed here. Our concept is very close to Mr. Frank-Walter Steinmeier's and other foreign ministers from the European Union. We should have a system of reciprocity. Sanctions would not be terminated unless we see progress. But at the same time, once we have full implementation, we can move forward. For each positive step in the field, we should then be taking a step in terms of sanctions as well. So step by step, rollback of such sanctions in exchange for positive developments in Ukraine. My impression from my visit to Ukraine is that the media focus has diminished. The situation, unfortunately, is still a very bad one, especially elderly persons. Hard hit by the conflict is something that I've noticed. So many young people have left the region. They are to be found scattered around the world these days. And we still have many people relying on humanitarian assistance. So Now, speaking as chairperson of the OSCE, I have a special responsibility to improve circumstances here. If the monitoring mission gets improved access, and also the time frames for activities are expanded, then this will have a positive impact in the field. Many people are not satisfied with the present situation. I asked, would it be better without OSCE observers, monitors? And I said, and I got from everyone, no, it would be far worse without the monitors. So though the circumstances are still difficult, we need to note the positive developments as well, even if there just has been small steps. The OSCE mission has not been able to solve all the problems, but there has been improvement, and if we can expand access, the time issue, but also the technical wherewithal and the measures in place to better equip the SMM, it will have a positive impact for the population. We only hear shots when the monitors leave. That means that if we expand the time frame and have more technical support, we will be able to counter that. And what is of essence, furthermore, is that people must live with checkpoints in that area. They have to cross checkpoints if they want to cross the line of conflict. So for the population there, we need some relief, minimizing waiting time, which is only possible if we beef up the SMM further, giving them more options, more possibilities. That is our goal. So not just increase momentum in terms of the conflict, but also improve the circumstances for the population at large. Thank you.